Hi everyone, welcome back to Architecture 5610. This is Tyler Young, and in this video I'm just going to cover really clean extruded curves. So to end up with clean extruded curves, what you really need is clean curves to begin with. So there's a few things that will really get in the way of good extrusions. So one would actually be anything that is stacked on top of each other vertically. So if you go into perspective, and I kind of just set this up as a very obvious version of this, but really on occasion you might have copied something from somewhere else, moved it back, something got nudged when you were in maybe this right view or the front view, and now you have a situation like this. So how do you very reliably and without having to zoom in infinitely and just hoping that everything is actually where it belongs, how do you get rid of things that are floating in the air and that aren't on that C-plane? So all you have to do is go to top view, and then you can just drag and select everything, and you'll type in project to C-plane. And when it says delete input objects, hit yes, and there we go. That's the command. So in the top view, you can't really tell the difference from what was going on, but if we go back to perspective, you'll see that nothing is floating above this. So going back to top view, the kind of thing that might be a little disturbing about this is we just projected everything to the C-plane, but does that mean that there's like duplicates of curves hidden in there? And oftentimes the answer would be yes. So as I hover my mouse over this and I click and I get this selection menu, you'll see that I'll have these two curves and I can't tell if one is different from the other. That can be very confusing, and it would be very, very tedious to have to go through and slowly figure out if there's duplicate lines on top of each other and then delete them manually. So the way to get around that is to just type in SELDUP, which is select duplicate, and it's just going to select all the duplicated lines, and I can just hit delete, and it's going to leave the original. And so anything that was floating is now projected. Anything that was floating and projected but a duplicate of something that was already on the ground or on the C-plane, now I just deleted with this select dupe command. So next is a little bit of a kind of weird one, because there's always these curves that are closed curves, and we have open curves, and really the curve boolean tool is that way of dealing with that. But one thing that you can do is just a little bit of cleanup before you even get to that point. So there's a command which is called select self-intersecting curve. So this is the one. I already knew it was there. But so as you can see, this is a curve that kind of wants to be a closed curve, but it's just not. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in explode, and it's going to explode this into all the little segments, and then I'll just deselect what I can, and then I'll join back the rest of these with just the J button. And then what I can do is I can select this one line and use the command split and select this other curve to split it up. I'll hit escape, and then I'll grab these curves again and join this back into one closed curve. This is definitely something that when it comes to laser cutting, which you guys will get into later, you really want to make sure you don't have self-intersecting curves. You want to make sure that things that are closed and are supposed to be closed curves are closed curves. If this wanted to be a hole in the floor or just some kind of pattern on the floor of a model, you know, that's something you'd really care about. But also those self-intersecting curves really make things awkward when you get into Illustrator. So cleaning them up here is a great idea. So now that we have this, really we're just about ready to extrude, but we still have all these kind of random lines just floating out in space. These here, you know, we'd want to move those onto their own separate layers. So one of the things I've been telling people is to use that curve Boolean command. So I'm just going to work through this for a moment, and I will show you that curve Boolean command once I've cleaned up some of these little segments that I ultimately want but don't necessarily need them to be extruded. So as you can see, now that I've got that image hidden, I also have everything on these other layers. So the interior little details, this kind of pattern here, I'm just going to hide that. I'm going to be able to hide the door and anything else, construction lines. Let's see, it looks like I missed one. Okay, so now that I've made sure that everything is a little cleaned up, I've got all of the walls where windows and doors would be. They just extend. That little door here would just move right across as a solid wall. So that way I can come back and I'll turn that line work on and I'll make any extrusions that would need to create doors as a separate operation. So I'm just going to select everything and use that wonderful command curve Boolean. And when you do curve Boolean, you just want to make sure that you're checking over all of the options here. And really, I should put an asterisk next to that, which is that always look at this command line for any command that you do, because there's always really useful stuff in there. So I'm just going to say all regions, and then I'm just going to deselect the ones I don't want. In this instance, that's a little bit faster than having to go through the other way around. So I'm just removing everything that I don't want. And now I'm just going to hit enter. And so if you saw before, I had delete it input set to none, combine regions yes, output curves, simplify curves yes, and all regions. And so now what I can do, and I pretty much am already there, is I have this separate layer, which is just for my plan outside curves. All of these line works that I just generated, I'm just going to have live on this layer. So now when I deselect it, we should be able to see everything on that layer, and we can hide it with the light bulb, and we can still maintain all of those source lines that I started with. So let's see. Here we go. Yeah, so now we see black where there was red, but if I move over to the walls layer and hide this layer, they all disappear. So before I extrude this, I'm also changing my layer to this one that's going to be a layer for my 3D model. So I'm just going to call that walls and chimney. At first I thought it would be interior walls, but I'm doing everything all at once. So here we go. But so now that's my active layer, and then the only layer of that's visible that has the line work that I need is just this outline, or sorry, it's this outside curves layer. So now I'm just going to select all that and type in my command extrude curve, and you just want to double check what options you have selected. So output should be surface. The direction doesn't really matter right now. This is the default direction. It's going to be vertical. You may mess with that later. You can manually do it a different direction, so you can have this go and extrude this at like a diagonal or something. Both sides no, solid yes, delete input no. Doesn't really, those I never really even mess with. And then you can either just type in a distance, or you can object snap to something. So you could object snap to something in front view right now if you have like your elevation hiding in the background. If you're trying to object snap to something that's in front view, and then you have the project checkbox in the object snaps selected, that's always going to be kind of difficult to work with, because if you are trying to select this upper point, it won't let you because the project button is selected. So it's projecting to the C plane even though it's object snapping to something up in the air. So you just need to turn that off, and then you can click. So I don't actually know what that distance ended up being. So if you ended up where you're not quite confident in what that height of your extrusion is, you can also use the scale 1D command. And now you just select a base point, which would most likely be the ground, and then the top of that wall. And when your mouse is hovering over something, if you look down here where my mouse is, it says the current height. So that says 7'1" something. So that shouldn't be right. So I'll just type in 9 feet and we'll experiment with it. But so that's really it for the extrude curve command, but I will show you a little preview for the next video. So if I can remember where my layers are, which is always, it's kind of nice to organize all your layers, but it does get a little confusing. So what I ended up doing is really nice for more of like an archived model where I've already created everything, but it can be a little cumbersome looking through all of it. So you want to kind of hide some things and then turn that visibility on and off so that way it's not too cumbersome. But I'm going to turn the outline off. I'm going to turn my wall layer back on. And then, let's see. So I think I'll also just change that to my current layer. Or actually I'll change my layer to the door openings that I made. And then I will hide that new extrusion. And then I'm going to open up this box command. And I'll show you a few things real quick. So if you're going to make a door, it's nice to have that line work for where the door is going to be. And then you can just type in the height. I'm going to go with 7 feet. And I'll draw a few of these. And one of the things about this step is, so I think that's probably good. So I'm just going to show all my walls, and then I'll select this extrusion, and I'm just actually going to use this button here to kind of extend it. You don't want anything, if you're going to like use a command, the Boolean difference command, to cut one volume from another volume, you want to make sure that those are intersecting like very generously. If it's just like barely intersecting, or if they're planar on the face, that's when you kind of invite disaster for things not quite working out. But so now I'm just going to type in Boolean difference, or I'm going to go over here in my toolbar and look at this Boolean union button. That's the two spheres, and I'll hit the arrow to find Boolean difference right here. So right now I have my kind of primary object selected, and then it says select surfaces or polysurfaces to subtract with. So that's going to be this door volume and this door volume. I can do 2 at a time. Don't get too crazy with trying to do multiple at a time, because a lot of those instances you'll end up freaking your computer out and it won't be able to calculate it. But so I'm just going to hide or turn that door openings category off. I'll go back to the wall and chimney layer, and I'll turn that layer off. So as you can see, I have this face and this face and this face all separated, and that's kind of an artifact of the Boolean operation. And I also, of course, noticed that I had one over here, and that was from having one line create part of this doorway or this wall portion, and then another line creating this. So when it extruded the curve as two faces, essentially. Let's see. Of course, I don't have that in my most recent commands for some reason. So here we go. And now is when you might need to mess with direction. So that's trying to extrude horizontally. I'm just trying to make an example here, but I'm going to go vertical. You can see that's exactly why we have faces of this closed, what is it going to call it? Closed solid polysurface. Yeah. So this polysurface has these two faces here. And that's because the lines that I used to make this extrusion looked like this instead of just one clean line all the way across like it could have been. But so to clean that up, you can use the merge coplanar face command to clean that. And then a lot of times you might have like a few. I know I saw one here, and I don't know if that's, I don't think that's one. But so to double check, you can turn the ISO curves off. When you extrude stuff and then you like manipulate it, especially, these little lines on the faces will show up. Those are called ISO curves. So you can just turn those off with that button there. And we see that line is still here. And we see, let's see. Yeah, we have that. And we have this. So now I'll do this one more time, merge coplanar faces, but I'll do merge all coplanar faces. There we go. You just hit enter and it just cleaned those things up and made it all monolithic. So that's really how you do that. In the next video, I'm going to go through some more complicated and more powerful, maybe not more powerful, but some very interesting 3D operations. So keep an eye out for that coming soon.